what we're going to cover today, a little bit of an agenda, if you will. We're going to talk a bit about streamlining processes, maximizing your impact, diversifying your fundraising portfolio. You know, I think with some of the tax changes that have happened over the last year, all nonprofits out there are really concerned about making sure that they can maximize their impact. And in particular, as it comes to that fundraising component. We're going to look at ways that you can amplify your digital presence and then some kind of tools and resources that you can use to increase your return on efforts. When we think about thematically what we're talking about today, we're really trying to focus on what were the things in 2017 that were effective for you in your role at your organization, and then also for your organization overall. As fundraisers, as communicators, as marketers, as people that want to do better and work at nonprofits, we have limited bandwidth, we have limited resources, so we always need to think about what are the things that make the most impact, that we're doing throughout our daily work lives, if you will, that are making the most impact. And when we started to talk with our friends over at CrowdRise about this webinar, the idea of the Pareto principle came into mind for me. And we've all probably heard this before, but it's this idea that 80% of what you do leads to 20% of your results, but then there's 20% of what you do that leads to 80% of your results. And it's the bottom section of these two little graphs that we want to focus on today. We want to try to help you think about and dive into, reflect upon that 20% of activities that lead to 80% of results. And so let's think about how you can start to dive into that. The first thing is that you need to give yourself the flexibility to let go of things that aren't working. A good way that I like to think about this is when you took over your position, what were the things that were assigned to you that your predecessor said, here's the 6 things that you need to do every month. What are the things that you're still doing because they told you to do them, but that you actually haven't seen any impact from? That's a great way to start. With that, then you want to look for the things that you're doing, either, you know, maybe your predecessor gave them to you, maybe they didn't, that are really working and that you're seeing success and that you're able to evaluate an ROI, and you want to double down in those places. Modify and make improvements where you can is the next thing that we're going to think about here. And then, you know, don't blow everything up just because it's a new year, right? Think about things that you can reuse, that you can recycle, that are going to give you pretty good bang for your buck, but that you're not going to need to start from scratch on. And then always be testing, right? As marketers, as fundraisers, as communicators, always be testing to make sure that everything that you're doing is as efficient as possible. So with that, a new year always brings new excitement. And I think many of us probably have some of that excitement, that new year, new excitement left. And then some of us can't believe that we're only, you know, a month and a half into 2018. But either way, try to harness the fact that you do have, you know, it's that, I'm a huge Calvin and Hobbes fan. I have no idea if this is going to resonate with anybody, but there's a really famous, the last Calvin and Hobbes that was ever made. And Hobbes is talking about that fresh sheet of snow, or fresh sheet of snow from the big snowfall the night before. Think about that, a clean sheet of paper that you've got to start over in 2018. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Trey, and he's going to go through the first 3 or so of 10 things that we've got for you all to help in your 2018 fundraising efforts.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabe. And also, I should point out that I, too, am a huge Calvin and Hobbes fan. So even if everyone else missed it, I was all over it, and I reference.
Yes, I have that. I'm just really going down a rabbit hole here, but believe it or not, I have the original print of that last Cowen and Hobbes hanging in my 1-year-old son's room at home. So I do like it a lot. And now I'll let you actually get to the content of the webinar. Go ahead, Trey.
I appreciate it. Yeah, so the first thing that we want to talk about is now being an awesome time to review your online fundraising tools. So, you know, you're probably right now planning out your events, your different campaigns for the year, which is great. And it's important to not just think about what can you do with these events, but what do you want to do, right? What are your actual needs, not necessarily just the limitations that you currently have. So once you've figured out what you'd like to do, now you have to find the tools that you'll need to execute, right? Are your current tools enough? Do they have features that you may not know about, or perhaps stuff that they've recently launched? Or maybe you need to go out and find some new tools to invest in. Thinking about tools as an investment to help you grow, not necessarily just as a cost of doing business, is a really healthy way to examine these things. The start of the year is a great time to get a level set with your existing partners, and it's also a great time to get demos of things that you may want to add down the line. So bump to that next slide. One of the bigger trends that we're seeing here is nonprofits moving some of their offline efforts online, right? So not necessarily selling tickets or handling event registrations in person through paper and pen, but getting that online. It's way more efficient. All your data is going to be collected in one place. There's less room for manual data errors. And you have an increased share opportunity, right? So use social fundraising to help your supporters spread the word. You're not going to be able to do that unless you're selling these things and promoting online. And just go to that second one now. So this is a huge one for us, and that's thinking mobile first, right? We really, really hope that you guys are already doing this. But if your nonprofit isn't, or your partners and the tools you're using are not thinking mobile first, that's something that we need to start doing, right? We do everything on our phones, and that includes things that nonprofits are focused on, right? Like fundraising campaigns and making donations. So on the next slide, we're going to go through a couple different things, right? But we really just want to talk about what does mobile optimization means. Basically, it just means making sure that all your content looks great on a phone and a tablet, as well as the laptop or desktop, right? So here's a quick 5 of our mobile-friendly best practices. First one's going to be the hamburger menu. I had no idea what that meant until my marketing team showed me, but it's basically the 3 lines in the top corner on your phone, right? Those slide-out menus are way, way easier to use than any other menu options on a mobile device. Also think about adjusting your content, right? There's less text. And we want to make that larger and a little bit easier to read. And the same thing applies to your buttons. Make sure that people who want to click can click, and those who don't accidentally push it and get the fat thumb syndrome. Remember that less space equals less content. So you're going to have to prioritize when you're thinking about this. Make sure that you're hiding or removing content that isn't going to help the specific action that you're trying to get. And then the last one will be scalable images. Just making sure that your pictures, your videos, graphics, whatever you're showcasing, look good on all different screen sizes. All right, so we're going to bump on to next and think about what should be mobile optimized, right? The real answer is everything. But I think most people only end up thinking about their website. So we're going to talk about 4 more just to make sure that you kind of have those top of mind and don't forget. Donation and campaign pages that are run by your third parties for events, peer-to-peer or general donation buttons should all be mobile optimized. Think about the emails and donation receipts that your folks are getting, right? It's great that you're communicating with your supporters, but there's a really strong chance that they're going to try and read that on their tablet or on their smartphone first. So we want to make sure it's really, really easy to do that. And then, as we talked about, a great thing for MPOs to be doing is moving their offline things online. But as soon as we do that for an event that requires, either tickets or registration, we need to make sure those pages are also optimized. So we're going to kick to the third thing, which will be meeting potential donors where they are, right? And all that means is get to know who your potential donors are. Where are they spending their time? So checking out websites, different blogs, are they attending events, throughout an area, or maybe subscribing to magazines? Are there connected interests to your cause? What else are your supporters interested in? It's just like real estate, right? We have to focus when we're thinking in terms of marketing about location, location, location. All right, let's bump to the next slide. So once you know where your supporters are, there's a few traditional marketing options that we can start to look at, right? One is simply buying ad space on a select website or blog. Another would be getting an ad or a link to your website or your blog in their newsletter, or even buying an email blast that would be sent to their list. Another really popular one is going to be SEM, which is just search engine marketing, basically, right? That just means using Google AdWords to push people to your fundraising campaigns that are looking for certain keywords. And then the last one we want to talk through is direct mail inserts. So not just sending something to a mailing list, but if a different publication reaches people who may be interested in your cause, see if you can add a flyer or add some content into something that they're already sending and already reaching out with. And then we're going to look at the next slide about some different options, right? So budget is always going to be something we have to consider, right? And so we're going to go through a few non-traditional opportunities that may be a little bit more budget friendly. So take a look at, maybe a really specific blog or website that could be a good location for potential donors, and see if they'll take contributed content, a blog or a new article you write that isn't self-serving, right? So it can't sound like an ad, but it provides interesting content, interesting info to potential readers and connects them to your cause. So some examples of that may be something like a story from your supporter, numbers and stats about the problem, or your ongoing solution efforts. You can also partner with companies that have a similar audience, right? You can do things like host webinars, or you can create downloadable content and get some interesting info from both parties out to their shared audience. And another really, really important thing is make sure all your info that donors can access is up to date. And a great place to start is with GuideStar, right? That information is going out to more than 200 nonprofit partners, so we want to make sure it's up to date and accurate. Speaking of GuideStar, I will let Gabe take over from here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Trey. And just before we move on from that, something to remind our nonprofit audience of is the Google AdWords grant program. If you are not taking advantage of that, you're leaving about $10,000 a month in AdWords on the table. So just look into that if you haven't already. And if we've got some time at the end of the webinar today, maybe we can dive into that a little bit more. But a great opportunity to do some of that traditional marketing that Trey was talking about. So with that, I want to get into a bit of the shameless plug part of the webinar today. And that's talking to you all about why it's important to update your profiles on GuideStar. And it is a shameless plug, as I said, but we also do think it's really important because we don't like hearing about nonprofits missing out on donations. And far too often I'll be talking to a foundation or I'll be talking to a friend of mine who's donating money to an organization, and they'll find out that I work for GuideStar, and they'll say, oh, I went to look at an organization on GuideStar, but they didn't have the information that I wanted on there, and so I didn't know whether or not to donate. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands the importance of why you should be updating your profiles on GuideStar. So more than likely, you already have a profile on GuideStar, whether you know it or not. It starts from information that we get primarily from IRS Forms 990. And then the idea is that you can come in just like you would personally claim and update your LinkedIn profile. You can claim and update your GuideStar nonprofit profile for your organization. And then you can tell the real true story about your organization. We have more than 9 million users a year just on GuideStar.org. I'm going to talk in a second about where else this information goes. Really importantly, we try to structure our profile so that we're moving beyond overhead ratios, right? 10 years ago, it was all about how many cents on the dollar were going to your mission. And we know that that's important, but that really isn't talking about the results or progress that you're having as an organization. So our new profiles are structured so that you can tell that story with both qualitative and quantitative information about how your organization is making a difference. So as Trey said, when you update your information on GuideStar, it doesn't just live on GuideStar.org. It goes to more than 230 different partners that use that information and share it with their audiences. So you can see there, CrowdRise is one of those organizations. But there's tons of other institutions and organizations that are using that information. Everyone from universities to community foundations to banks. For example, I can donate my credit card points, my Capital One credit card points using a GuideStar interface. Facebook, Amazon Smile, Google for Nonprofits, that Google Grants program that I talked about. All major U.S. donor-advised funds. Why is that important? If that's just a set of words to you, which I think for a lot of us, we're kind of intimidated by the idea of donor-advised funds, just between Vanguard and Fidelity, which are two of our main partners, I think it was $15 billion in giving last year. So grants management software, if you're applying for a grant with a foundation, they're probably going to be seeing your information from GuideStar and a whole host of other organizations and platforms as well. So when you come and update your profile on GuideStar, you've got the opportunity to earn a seal of transparency, and we award 4 different seals of transparency based on the amount of information that you update on your profile. When you get these seals, then you can share them with your audience. You know, so many organizations we will see have this kind of on the bottom of their homepage, if you will, as a little bit of an accreditation, or will put it in print on their flyers that they send out. And we love seeing that. And what each seal real quickly represents, starting from bronze, that's just basic contact information. So people can find you, they can find your organization, they can potentially get donations to your organization as well. Silver is a little bit of financial information just so they can grow to trust you. And then gold and platinum is where it really starts to get interesting. And the gold information is kind of the story behind how your organization is making a difference. What are your goals and strategies? How are you uniquely positioned to help solve your mission? And then platinum is the number behind the results that you're having as an organization. There's new research that comes out all the time, and it's probably the most looked at thing that donors are looking for now, is the number behind how much of a difference that you're making. If you're a homeless shelter, how many beds did you open up? If you're a soup kitchen, how many meals did you serve? If you're an aftercare program, how many students came and took advantage of your services? Those sorts of things. And that would all live in the platinum functionality of your GuideStar nonprofit profile. So with that, here's how you get started. There's 2 different ways. You can just go to GuideStar.org and click on that button up at the top that says Update Nonprofit Profile, or you can just go to GuideStar.org/update. You'll start the process from there. We very quickly just need to claim and make sure you're actually who you say you are with your organization. And then from there, you can start updating. You can get a bronze seal in as little as 15 minutes. You can get all the way to platinum in just a couple of hours if it's information that you already have. So that's it. That's the end of the shameless plug. So we hope that everybody takes advantage of that and updates their profile on GuideStar. With that, I want to dive into a bit why it's important to talk to your supporters differently. You know, years ago, it was easy enough to just send out a blanket message that had to talk a little bit about your organization, but wasn't broken down on who you're talking to. And now with so many options that all of our audiences have in front of them, you really need to go a step beyond that, and you need to try to talk to that person. And most of us have list sizes that are big enough that you're not actually going to be able to individualize that messaging, but you need to do a good job of kind of faking it the best that you can anyway. And so a couple of ways that you can do that are by audience segmentation. And then again, like I said, it's not using the one-size-fits-all messaging. And so let's talk about some different ways that you can do that. And the first is by demographic segmentation. You can see here are 5 of the main ways that marketers and communicators and fundraisers like to break down our different audience groups. And you can think about how the messaging would change depending on if you're talking to baby boomers compared to if you're talking to millennials, say. That's a very different type of message that you'd want to be sending depending on the group that you're talking to. And so you want to think about that. You want to think about how you can get that information on your audience and start to segment those lists and get nice and clean lists so you can speak to them as close to individually as possible. And don't forget that you can do a combination of the 2, right? So you can combine different demographic segments to dive even further into your different lists and to speak even kind of closer, get as close as possible to that individual communications as possible. The next is that you can break down your audience by the way that they are interacting with your organization. You know, are they donors? Are they volunteers? Are they the beneficiaries that are using your services? And each of these different types of groups, or are they fundraisers for you even? And each of these different types of groups should really get a different type of message because you have different things that they can help your organization with. Or if it's a case of beneficiaries, you want to make sure that your organization is doing the best job that it can. You want to get, as we call it, as the kind of wonks call it in the sector, that beneficiary feedback. And so you want to make sure that you're talking to them in the right way and getting that information from them. And so you want to think about how has this person interacted with you in the past. And that gets into a little bit of valuation, if you will. And for donors, there's a couple of different categories that you can start to slice people into, and it has to do with kind of how they've given before. Are they a one-time donor? Are they a recurring donor, someone that's giving every month? Or are they a high wealth donor? And for each of these different categories, and again, you can combine this with different demographics if you want to, and that works for your organization. But you want to think about the value of each of these different donors and what's important to them, right? We want to think about building relationships, particularly when it comes to those recurring and high wealth donors. How can you spend the right amount of time most impactfully with these different types of donors? So you want to think about that as you go through your communications. You want to also think about what's important to these different groups, right? So maybe it's just helpful information on the tax changes in 2018. That's something that all of us as nonprofits should be thinking about communicating to our donors. So that might just be a helpful little article that you see, or maybe the CFO of your organization writes a quick little blog post that you get out to people. Just keep in mind kind of what is going to be important to that different group, that segmented group that you're sending to these different types of individuals. And then lastly, it's all about the data, right? In 2018, oh my gosh, I almost said 2017, but in 2018, if you're not collecting good data and you're not using that to make better decisions, then you're probably leaving money on the table. So why is it important to get that supporter data on the different donations? Well, it starts by helping you build that database and that mailing list. People's information is really important to us as organizations. At GuideStar, we deal with about a list of 3 million people or so it's quite a big list that we're dealing with. And so we need to make sure to keep that as clean as possible. Your list probably isn't quite that big, but maybe it is. Maybe it's bigger. But you need to just think about kind of how to get the important different types of data points that you need on your stakeholder list, and then how you can keep that as clean as possible. And that's going to give you that ability, going back to point number 5, to segment as much as possible and to start to have that kind of feeling of personalization in your communications. And then it's also going to give you that data on what works, right? Going back to that 80-20 that I talked about at the beginning, how are you going to know what's most effective if you're not monitoring that data coming in from your different actions as a marketer, as a fundraiser, as a communicator? And then you also are going to want to think about kind of what are those messaging points, or what are the programs even that your donors support the most? What are the things that resonate with them? And again, you're going to kind of layer that on with that testing element of things to make sure that you're having the most impact. So here's some things that you can ask yourself as you start to go through your database. And the first is, are there any gaps in your existing data? Do you need a piece of information on somebody, maybe their geographic location? Maybe it's their role if you're talking to people that are at a business, say. The next thing that you want to ask is, do you have the right tools to collect the right data points? So important in 2018. So much of what we do is based off of our CRMs now. So, are you still using an Excel document as your CRM? Lots of organizations are. Trey is going to talk in just a minute about some opportunities to really maybe move your organization beyond that Excel CRM into something that's a bit more useful maybe for you as an organization. The next thing is, who owns your data? As you start to diversify your fundraising platforms, sometimes you're going to run into a situation where you may not actually have all of the information that you need. So that's just something to keep in mind. We love reaching new donors in new places, and one of the sacrifices that we may make is that you may not get to own every piece of information that you'd like about that donor. And that's that, can I take the data with me, right? Do you own it? Can you take it? Can you start to evaluate it and use it for your efforts? So with that, I'm going to toss it back to Trey, but just a couple of little quick things. First, make sure questions, any of them that you have, go ahead and ask right in that questions pane. And just to answer one of the questions that we're getting a lot of, we are going to send out both the recording and the slides of this webinar afterwards. So don't worry, you're going to get that. If you're scrambling to take notes right now, I know I talk way too fast, so sorry about that. But I promise that we're going to send this all out, so you'll have it later. We'll also provide some contact information for Trey, myself, GuideStar, CrowdRise, so that you can reach out to us. So with that, Trey, you want to take it over and talk a little bit about some of the algorithm changes at Facebook?
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Yeah, so we're going to jump in with number 7 and talk a little bit about Facebook, which is kind of beast, in and of itself. It's always a little bit of a puzzle. And then just to make sure everybody's on their toes, they just changed their algorithm again. So, due to some things with fake news and the election, Facebook essentially wanted to change how brand pages, those that are owned by like companies, celebs and nonprofit orgs, are reaching their followers. So Facebook is now focused on making sure that its users are really seeing what they call meaningful social interactions. But what that really means is just they're seeing posts from their friends and family first. So before Facebook even made this change, any post that was made by a brand page would probably reach right around 8% of the audience that was already following their page. So with this new algorithm change, that number is going to go down even further. Individuals are really going to just start seeing, less potential exposure to public content and more exposure to content being shared by individuals. And on the next slide, we'll go through a couple things that you can continue to do, but for those of you that are already actively using Facebook, you should continue to do so. If your posts were working in the past, you can just look to boosting those or maybe promoting them, right? Sometimes for just 25 or 50 bucks, you can push a message out to a couple different groups of people, right? You'll typically have 3 options that you can promote these posts to. One is going to be just your followers. The other one is going to be your followers plus all of their friends. And then you can also pick a custom audience based on segmentation data, right? So kind of the idea that Gabe was talking about a little bit earlier. The other option you can do with Facebook is really start to take advantage of these changes, right? And use social fundraising with your campaigns. So social fundraising is really just getting your supporters to post on their own networks organically. These posts that they're making are going to be reaching an audience that you can't reach without paying, and is going to be at a higher percentage than a brand post that you guys would push out. Engaging in social fundraising is really just all about making sure your campaign pages and your donation flows are optimized to make social sharing super easy and make sure that you're encouraging supporters to actually take that action. And then next one will be number 8. Which is really, it should seem obvious, but don't forget to take advantage of your nonprofit status. This is something that everybody on this webinar can really look into pretty quickly, and that's just helping you guys save money so that you can do more with the money you have, right? CrowdRise and our team actually did a whole bunch of research and came up with 20 awesome discounts that already exist for nonprofits. I'm going to go over a few of them right now, but make sure you check out the blog. And as Gabe mentioned, we'll have a follow-up to the webinar, so I'll make sure to include a link to that because all 20 of these are worth checking out. But really quick, I'm going to go on to the next slide, and we'll talk about a couple of these in depth a little bit more. So Gabe mentioned earlier that data is so important, right? We've already kind of talked about that a little bit. And Salesforce is a really great way to get all that data into one place. There are some free accounts available with these guys, but they also promote up to 75% off of their regular prices for nonprofits. We really like Salesforce and think it's genuinely a great option because it integrates with a ton of tools, and that includes CrowdRise. So we're going to move on to the next one that we want to talk about a little bit. We've discussed kind of trying to get your cause where people are already looking, right? One of the places that they're looking is in Google searches. So I think it's good to ask yourself honestly, are you showing up when potential supporters are searching for your name? And then even more, are you showing up when they're just maybe searching for your cause, right? Moz is a really cool tool, and it gives you additional tools and support that will help you improve your SEO ranking and help you show up for those searches. And they do a similar thing with Facebook. It's up to 75% off, so a really, really awesome discount and something you guys can take advantage of. And then on the next slide, we'll go into kind of this last one that we want to dive into. PictoChart. Creating cool content for your webpage or a direct mail piece or social and whatever marketing channels that you're into can be a little difficult, right? We're definitely not all designers, myself included, and that's kind of where PictoChart can come in and help. It's really, really simple, easy to use software, and it lets you create really cool infographics that will engage with your supporters. And these guys have an awesome discount. It goes up to 86% off for nonprofits when they go in. So definitely something worth checking out to help y'all. All right, so we're going to go to the number 9 here. The first 8 that we've talked about have really been focused on the nonprofit itself, right? Number 9 is more for you individuals listening out there. We think it's so important to just take a few moments and remember you are a decent human. You are out there every single day making a difference. So try and take a few moments this year and remind yourself why you're doing what you do, right? We get it. It's really hard not to get stuck on a fundraising goal or whatever number or metric that you're being put up against year over year. So try and make sure you're taking time to celebrate the wins as they come, because we know how hard you're fighting. And the last point on this is make sure to have fun. You know, everybody loses sight of that. And even with my juggling competition, like, we still lose sight of that too over here, but we do try and take a few minutes, you know, every day or every week, whatever you can work, and remind yourself to try and have a little fun. And now we're on to the last one, and it's just a reminder that you are not alone. So we're all in this together. Even for those of you, you know, who have to wear a whole bunch of hats, or maybe even all of the hats at your nonprofit, there is still support for you. We're all here trying to make this world just a little bit better in our own way. Don't be afraid to share ideas, you know, share best practices with other folks who work at nonprofits. Ultimately, we want to help each other achieve our goals.